And we're back. That's an interesting movie. I'm very interested to see what the comments are going to be from our viewers. There's a few things of interest in this. The first thing that leaps to my mind is again how the bad guys were kept vague and murky in this one. There was no country mentioned. We just don't necessarily know that the Nazis were involved. There's a real good reason for that. That the British studios were just not allowed to mention that they were Nazis because we just didn't see them as an enemy at that time. Although I think, as was alluded to by one of us watching tonight, was that Alfred Hitchcock probably did see them as a threat and be this as a veiled sort of representation of that. Our character, Mr. Verloc, he performed these acts of sabotage for money, not for any country, despite the fact that he had this Eastern European, German, Austrian accent. It definitely wasn't that. So just to show again also how they were distancing themselves from the Nazis. In the book, Mr. Verloc's first name was Adolf, and they changed it in the movie to Karl. So there you go. Another little bit interesting is how about that bomb sequence? Very, very well filmed. There's actually 38 separate cuts in that sequence where, we see the boy, we see the time clocks, we see the traffic, we see the boy, we see the conductor, we see the bomb. It's interesting too that he didn't show the bomb the same way each time. He showed it from 4 or 5 or 6 different angles, because after all, it really wasn't just a package, it was a bomb. The music in that scene, if you do watch it again, and I recommend you do, is just absolutely excellent in that scene. But boy, the suspense was created, and they killed off little Stevie. So just to let you know, audiences did not care for that scene. That was way too much for audiences in 1936. The fact that they killed off little Stevie. One of Alfred Hitchcock's most avid fans, movie critics, C.A. Lejeune, one of his biggest fans that always wrote nice things about his movies, at the premiere, she actually came up to him afterwards and really let him have it. She thought that was horrifying that they let this cute little boy get killed on camera. And it's interesting that Alfred Hitchcock pretty much immediately afterwards and ever since admitted that he really did make a mistake filming in that way. And I feel, and I'd be interested to know what you think as well, or what Diane thinks, is, did he make a mistake because he shouldn't have killed the boy, or did he make a mistake because the suspense as it was set up just really didn't give the audiences the release that they needed? As he talked about, you have this scene building up over 3 and 4 and 5 minutes of suspense. Somebody better find that bomb and throw it off the bus at the last second, and everybody can go, whoo, that was great. And they didn't. The bomb went off and everybody was killed. Or is it because he realizes that the boy shouldn't have been killed? The boy had to be killed. I mean, in the book, like I said, there were lots of changes from the book, but without Stevie being killed, there is no book, and probably there is no movie. He was actually quoted as saying, with regards to that scene, that I should have had Verloc kill the boy deliberately, but without showing it on the screen, and then for the wife to avenge her young brother by killing her husband. Maybe, maybe not. Who really knows? Doesn't matter. In fact, in the book, getting back to the fact that little Stevie was killed in the book as well, the quote was they had to pick up parts of Stevie with a shovel. So they certainly spared us that, and people who had read the book or were familiar with it, who saw the movie, were waiting for him to die. It's just that most people weren't. Certainly that critic was not. So Hitchcock was pretty much painted into a corner of having to kill off this little kid to adapt the movie. The people who knew the book real well were already angry with all the changes. Imagine if that didn't happen. So getting back to the music in that scene, and how good it is, how great the build-up with that music in that scene is. What's interesting is the other scene, the stabbing scene, where Verloc is killed by his wife. There is no music in that scene, zero, none. And you really don't need the music to build it up. You could hear his footsteps when he was walking towards her when she was thinking about the knife. Absolutely fantastic. It reminds me of a scene later on in Torn Curtain, where there's a very violent struggle, I believe, again with the knife, and quite deliberately zero music, and just an amazing scene. We have that to look forward to in the future. But again, back to that scene with the stabbing. Did she stab him? Was it an accident? getting back to the book, she stabbed him. I mean, when she realized what he'd done, later on he was laying down, she picked up the knife, came up from behind him when he was laying down, and she plunged it right into his chest, and he died instantly in the book, make no mistake about it. But in this, maybe because he wanted to keep audiences sympathetic towards Sylvia Sidney, maybe because she wouldn't have any part of that, who knows, but it was definitely left a little bit murky as to how did he end up getting this knife stuck in him and dead. So very interesting. It's interesting too, we had the cop in the end, the detective maybe being the boyfriend, and with his questionable ethics, we saw almost the exact same sort of things in Blackmail with Annie Andra, where at the end she wanted to confess and he wouldn't let her, and that's very interesting. That whole film was not filmed on location in London. It was all filmed out in a field, especially the scene that the parade was, that Lord Mayor's show day. And if you don't believe me, take a look at this photo. You can see all those people lined up. That's a big backdrop. That picture of the buildings in the background, that was out in a field. So very interesting. It makes you wonder, why not just film in London? You're in London anyways, but that's simply not what they did. It wasn't done. You filmed with backdrops. So a couple other things. The Who Killed Cock Robin. Very dark, and we watched the clip. I'm going to link the clip down below this on YouTube so you can watch it. It takes 8 minutes. It's worthwhile. It's in color too. Maybe that was the cameo. Cock Robin, Hitchcock, who knows? But again, very bleak and not meant for kids. Maybe one of the reasons, if you're realizing, hey, I've never seen that, because it was for adults. Who Killed Cock Robin? So. Yeah, like we said, we're real interested to hear everybody's comments on what they thought about this, whether that was too much for you. If you're a parent and you have a little boy, maybe that was too much for you. For me personally, unfortunately, I have to admit, when I first saw this movie, I already knew that he blew up with the bomb, so I actually don't know what I would have thought. I think I would have been surprised. I think I would have said, wow, they killed him. Wow, that's weird for a movie. But in the end, I actually don't know. Yeah, we're definitely seeing, not the first scene with birds, again, getting back to Blackmail, when Annie Andra wakes up with the horror that this guy's been killed, that homicide took place, and you had that bird chirping in the background. That was the beginning of birds, and we'll see that in next week's movie, actually. When you see birds, that means chaos. It's pretty cool, but definitely they're everywhere in this one. We also had... the theater, again, the theater scenes in 39 Steps, violence in a theater, quite on purpose that this was set in a theater. In the book, Verloc owned like a little cigar shop in London, and there was no detective who had the hots for his wife, so that was probably fun for him to show a theater scene like that. So. Good, so again, 1936, we just wanted to mention that we're done with 1936. Next week's picture is from 1937. The best picture in 1936 was or is The Great Ziegfeld, and if you have 3 hours, it's worthwhile. We watched it this week, and we had our iPhones and we were reading up about Flo Ziegfeld, and it was worthwhile. We learned a lot, and it's actually a good movie. It's the kind of movie that really should have been Best Picture, because it's just huge, and they spent a lot of money on it, and there's lots of actors, and very, very interesting. So again, if you have 3 hours. So, but a lot of the other movies from 1936 that we saw that were the highest grossing films of the year weren't that good. They really didn't really hold our interest that well. We saw the Charlie Chaplin entry from 1936 called Modern Times, and parts of it were fun. But on an interesting note, though, he made a silent film. I mean, how were the Jazz Singer came out in 1927, Hitchcock's first sound film, of course, Blackmail from 1929, and here's Charlie Chaplin, because he owned his own studio, he had owned everything, had all the control, still making a silent film. So for that alone, it's worth checking out. But there are better Charlie Chaplin films that were out there that we have mentioned before. So very good. So that's it. We're good. So we're done with this one. So we look forward to seeing you next week. What? We look forward to we look forward to seeing you next week for movie number 15, Young and Innocent, which is one of her favorite British Hitchcock movies. So from our couch to yours, we'll see you next week.